longing to be free. Thank you. Sound the Savior's invitation, sweetly saying, come to me. Blow the trumpet, trusty watchman, blow it loud on land and sea. God commission sounds a message, every captain may be free. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Sister Pam ready? Are you ready? Yeah, I met Sister Pam and her husband at a marriage retreat, and I also met her daughter and son-in-law. Yes, yeah, they were at a marriage retreat, and so we had a good time. The daughter and husband singing our little choir that we have, and we had a blessed time together. I wish they were here.
Thank you. I have one. Oh, okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pam Grove, and my husband and my daughter and my son-in-law, we run Preserving Life Ministries, and we've been teaching food preservation for quite some time. Just a quick who I am. I started preserving when I was young. My grandmother and my mother did. I was probably about 7 when we were gardening and shelling peas and doing all kinds. We didn't put any food in a jar, but we were manual labor. So there was a lot that we had to do. But I didn't really like it at the time, and I didn't think I was interested in it. It wasn't until I became an adult, got married, and was poor. I was real interested then. We needed to eat. So we raised our kids that way. We took them in their car seats to the fields. We lived in Wisconsin. Lots of farms where you could pick yourself, and we would take them out. They would eat grass, they'd eat straw, they'd eat the strawberry. They grew up eating their food raw. So after I graduated nursing school, I said, I don't have to do this anymore. I quit. And it was the worst thing I ever did. I quit for 14 years. I thought that, I had the American nightmare as a goal, where you go to college, you get a good job, and you earn all this money, and you forget about the things that God gave you. Yes. And in 2007, I realized that I didn't know the Adventist message because somebody introduced me to country living. And then I went to a seminar. Well, actually, somebody sent me DVDs of the School of the Prophets, and I spent weeks crying because the message that I grew up in and the message of God are two different things. And so the Lord showed me, you need to go back to canning, and you need to do it big time. I didn't know that I was going to be teaching. I was at home one day. I was canning tomatoes, and a friend came over, and she said, I want to learn that. And I said, oh, no. I'm not teaching you that. It's hard work. I don't like doing it, but I have to do it, so I'm not teaching you. And she started crying. And she said, you're selfish. God's people need to know this, and you won't share. And I just had bad dreams, and the Holy Spirit kept me up. The next day I called her. I said, come on, we're going to go get some tomatoes. I'm going to teach you how to make this tomato sauce. So we did. But little did I know that she was a herald for God. She went from church to church saying, I know this lady who can teach you how to can. I'm like, look, I'm the back in the corner person. I'll help you out. But I don't stand up front, teach anybody anything. But anyway, I prayed about it. She prayed with me, and we did that. We started with our own church, and then little by little, we started going to other churches and teaching. And I'm still today shaking. I don't think I'll ever get past that. I was filming one with my granddaughters. We were doing a bread making program, and we were filming, and she hugged me. And the producer said, my granddaughter said, Nana, you're shaking like a leaf. And the producer said, oh, she always does that. So we've been doing this for how many years, and she does it every time. But I know that God is here. I know the Holy Spirit is here. I'm going to give you a testimony about this week. I'm going to start further back than that. I have a burden for God's people to learn how to do this. And I've been teaching God's people, and they come back year after year, and I said, oh, I'm excited. What did you get done? Nothing. If we have a class of 20 to 25, we may have one person that actually practices. And it started bothering me. And this week, when I was thinking about coming here to do the class, I was asking the Lord, what do I teach? Because either I'm ineffective or I'm not explaining it correctly. Something's wrong, and I need you to show me what's wrong. And as I was praying, the Lord took me in what you're going to see today, I've never done it before. It's a direction that I didn't expect to be going in, but it's the truth. And I know it's the truth. And it's the truth that makes me do this. And I'm hoping somebody leaves here and says, I now understand. Amen. So it's not a hands-on canning demonstration, because that's not the beginning. You need to understand where we are right now and why you need to do this. And we are further down the road than you think we are. Because I'm going to share 3 things with you that I found out in the last 2 days that woke me up. And I thought that I kind of understood where I was. I didn't have a clue. And I'm wondering how many of you are going to find what I found surprising. So let's get started. Is food preservation optional, essential, or urgent? What would you say? Urgent. Okay. All right, now, you're going on this ride with me, and people always say that. But by the end, I want you to tell me what you think. Okay, so have you heard? Have you heard that food preservation is popular today? That it's a fad, that people are doing it any way they want to do it because it's novel. You can have people come and you can teach classes. You can have your pantry full of all these beautiful jars. People build elaborate pantries and root cellars for their food products to be on display. I just find that amazing. Have you heard that Jesus is coming again and there's a food shortage? Have you heard that when the children of Israel were warned that they were going to be overrun, that they collected their food, they were obedient in that respect. But they weren't obedient to the Lord, so they fought over it, and they ended up eating their children. So have you heard that because what the Bible says happened before is going to happen again? So how many of us want to have to eat our children because we were too lazy to prepare? I read this quote. It's from Letter 8, 1895, and it's also in the third volume of Testimonies, page 32. It says, "Do not present the truth in a formal manner, but let the heart be vitalized by the Spirit of God, and let your words be spoken with such certainty that those who hear may know that the truth is a reality to you. Those who believe sacred, eternal truth must put their whole soul into their efforts. We must be stirred to the very heart as we behold the fulfilling of prophecy in the closing scenes of this earth's history. As our vision extends still further into the glories of eternity, the coming of Christ with power and great glory, and the scenes of the great day of judgment, we should not remain lame and unmoved. The very tones of the voice, the look, the words should possess irresistible power to move hearts and control minds. Jesus should be found in the heart of the minister. If Jesus is in the words and in the tone of voice, if they are mellow with his tender love, it will prove a blessing of more valuable than all the riches, pleasures, and glories of the earth. From such blessings will not come and go without accomplishing a work." That's what God told me I wasn't doing. I have to show you what I do. I live this. And I have been reluctant to open my pantry and let people see, but I'm to that place. When God gave me this 2 days ago, I said, okay, Lord, I hear you loud and clear. I'm going to go through before I tell you the rest of my testimony. The focus of this presentation is to clarify the importance of knowing the time that we live in, to understand the importance of physical as well as spiritual preparation, to examine our motives for delay, to recognize which pieces of equipment are essential, because we use a lot of equipment in our presentations, but some of it is to make my life easier. It's not essential. But today, we're only dealing with essentials, what you have to get started. Because the truth of it is, even the essentials are hard to get. I sell everything that I use in my presentations, except the Excalibur dehydrator. But everything else I sell. But now it's really hard for me to get it. I have a book of people lined up waiting for a grain mill. I have people lined up waiting for canners in my book because I cannot get them. They're very hard to get. And if you do, somebody's on eBay ripping you off for almost 3 times the price. So, we're almost too late because the doors are closing and there's just a little daylight left. And if you're going to get started, you need to know the essentials and you need to get out there and get them if you don't have them. So we want to recognize which pieces of equipment are essential and know where to get them. We want to locate the resources for training and begin now. And this is not a demonstration, so we won't do any training. But demonstrations can be obtained free of charge almost anywhere and everywhere. The one caution that I would give you is don't get it from YouTube. Because YouTube there's a group on YouTube called Rebel Canners, and they can by the methods that are unsanctioned and untested. So if one of their groups died, do you think they would tell you about it? Probably not, because they're called Rebel Canners for a reason. So if you're going to use somebody from YouTube, know them. Find out what their background is. Find out if they stand by the standards that have been tested in the 1930s. Because if they don't, you're risking getting botulism and being either totally paralyzed or dead. So, and canning is not the most important, or food preservation is not the most important aspect. The spiritual aspect comes first. You have to ask God, what method do you want me to use, and how do you want me to do it? Because there is individual ways of doing all these food preservation methods for each person. Some people are going to use, like I have a canner that holds 18 quarts. Some people are going to do it big time. Some people are single and they can use a small jelly maker, plug it in and get it done quick because they don't need very much. But it's not the same for everybody. It is different. Don't let anybody make you believe you have to have this and you have to do it this way. You have to follow the guidelines for safety, but the method that you use to do that should be your own, because then you're comfortable with it. So next we're going to talk about knowing the importance of the time that we are living in. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Do you see anything happening in our nation that would indicate a need for a major change in your life? We've seen a lot of shortages in goods and service, but is it really all that serious? Are we going to bounce back like we've always done and just go on with life as usual? So the Bible tells us in Proverbs 4:7, in all thy getting, get understanding. Understand the times we are living in. 3 key indicators that our government is legislating limits to our access to essential services and goods. Indicator number 1, on December 8, 2021, our president signed an executive order, it's number 14017. Please look it up. It's 80-some pages long. Read it. Read it. 14017. I read it. I saved it on my computer because I couldn't believe what I read. And there's other orders that have been executed since then that actually spell out what this order is talking about, because it's a little vague. But if you go on and you read the ones that came out in March and in April and in May and in June, because he's constantly adding to this, you will see what's happening to our civil liberties. So this order was given to increase domestic production capacity and to renew the sources of our economic security. Now listen to the words here. They're going to increase domestic production. Now domestic is us, but it's going to be for economic security, and that's not going to be for us. Is to invest in the production and manufacturing capabilities that will enable a modern technology-enabled defense industrial base. What they're talking, you're getting this, okay? Foster development of an industrial workforce to ensure the right skill sets are available as needed to meet our requirements. What are the requirements? Contribute to our national defense stockpile. Now, this is a big thing on every one of those executive orders. We always had a national defense stockpile, but now our limited goods that we can't find anywhere are going to the national defense stockpile. Prioritize collaboration. Prioritize collaboration with our allies and partners to build a network of secure global supply chains. So who's being supplied? They are talking about themselves. So safeguard global market integrity to ensure that industry can continue to provide superior products and services to our force. Strong commitment to cooperate with all who have a stake in our national security, our interagency collaborators, Congress, private industry. Look how far down the line we come. The American people and our allies and international partners. By emphasizing teamwork, this report delivers a whole-of-nation approach to national security and invites greater industrial collaboration with our friends across the globe. Manufacturing as we know it is not going to exist in very soon. Factories are retooling. They used to make one thing, but they're retooling. 4 key focus areas for this executive order are kinetic capabilities, current missile systems and advanced and developing missile capabilities, including hypersonic weapons technology, as well as directed energy weapons. In a nation that claims we're the peacemakers, why are we building up hypersonic weapons? Energy storage and batteries, high-capacity batteries with a particular focus on lithium. How many of you have noticed that if you're off-grid like we are, how many of you have noticed the push for lithium batteries? If you want to get a battery, everybody's pushing you towards lithium. Some of these lithium batteries have chips in them. Why does a battery need a microchip? So then they know where you are if you're off the grid. They know where you are anyway, but they're changing technology so that you can be shut down more easily. Because by 2026, all cars have to have a kill switch so they can be shut off at a moment's notice. So casting and forgings, metals or composites developed into key parts and manufacturing tools through high-intensity processes. Now, they use those processes to make weapons of war. And so we'll get into it, but in the 1940s, you'll see that what Biden is doing, it was done before. Microelectronics, now they have state-of-the-art practices, and then they're going to do state-of-the-practice and state-of-the-art microelectronics. So they have different level of microelectronics that are able to monitor any and everything that happens on the planet. So in order for those 4 target things to work, they have to have these strategic underpinnings, these strategic enablers. Without these enablers, they can't get this process off the ground. So underpinning all 4 of the key focus areas are strategic enablers that are required for mission success. Fragility or gaps in these enablers creates operational and strategic risk and addresses the challenges in each is critical to building overall supply chain resilience. So if they don't get everybody they want to cooperate, then the supply chain is not going to be, they're not going to be able to control the supply chain. So the strategic enablers are, they need a workforce. Who would that be? Trade skills through doctoral level engineering skills. So from the baseline to the highest level, they want a workforce. cyber postures. They need people in industrial security, counterintelligence, and cybersecurity. They want manufacturing people. They want small businesses, but they want key members of these small businesses. And all of these now, all of that we're reading, now fall under the Department of Defense. So they want people who know about energy and transportation, the production and distribution of agricultural commodity and food products are now under the Department of Defense. Public health, and biological preparedness, information and communications, and the defense. So it says the National Defense and Industrial Association, the health and readiness of the defense industrial revelation. So all of these services that we've taken for granted, they had their own departments. They're now going to fall under the Department of Defense. So what this seems to say is that our nation is prioritizing industry to use its resources to prepare for war. But guess where that war is going to be fought? Right here. Right here. Because when they strip, well, we're going to go further. We'll go further. There is nothing in this 84-page document that prioritizes production and shipment of goods and services for the citizens' needs. When you read it, it sounds like that. But if you read each order that came out after, the picture starts to become very grim. Everything, including our ability to freely use energy, how we are transported, food availability, our ability to grow our own food, healthcare will now be controlled by our government. Only those with certain skills and level of education, cybersecurity experience, specific manufacturing capabilities, or certain key small business members will be able to fully function in our new world order. We are all expected to cooperate with whatever the final plan is going to be as a show of solidarity and national security and climate change control. You're going to hear that this happened. The same wording has been used before, but now it's gone to a deeper level than it was previously. Indicator number 2, the new digital currency. And here's why you should be worried about that. On March 9th, an executive order was enacted to study digital assets and report about their use and ability to regulate them with the intent of laying the groundwork for a potential new U.S. currency, the digital dollar. Several federal agencies, including the Treasury Department, were ordered to study the development of a new central bank digital currency system and to produce a report within 180 days. That 180 days expired in March. So that report has already been done, and they've moved forward. So they're going to discuss the potential risks and benefits of a digital dollar. The Treasury Department, Office of the Attorney General, and the Federal Reserve were directed to work towards producing a legislative proposal to create the digital currency within that 210 days, which is about 7 months, and that 210 days expires in October of this year. So adopting a digital currency would be one of the most drastic expansions of federal power that has ever been seen, possibly placing individuals and businesses in grave danger of losing their social and economic freedoms because the digital dollar has no bank behind it. It is a chip and it can be programmed. At least 2 prototypes of a digital dollar are near completion, developed by the officials at the Federal Reserve of Boston and M.E.E.T. They plan to unveil their research as soon as this month, as soon as July. And he said that both the Fed and M.E.E.T. hope to unveil some of their work in the 3rd quarter, including at least 2 prototypes of software platforms that could move, store, and settle transactions made with digital dollars. Once the prototypes are released, others will be able to build on this. So once the government releases it, other people are going to do the same thing. There are major issues that the central bank, the Treasury, and Congress must address regarding the digital dollar. These include whether the Fed should host customer accounts itself, whether to allow anonymity, and what protections consumers would have in case of a cyber attack or erroneous transaction. He added that the Fed's work is meant to show what's possible without taking a stand on the major issues. So if they're going to be the overseers, how do you not take a stand? We think it's important that we not wait for the policy debate. Now listen to this, because then we'll be a year or so behind. This will take significant outreach to the industry and serious debate. He's also saying that the central bank will fully adopt a digital dollar only with the support of the nation's elected leaders. And then he backtracks. In February, he said that the digital dollar is a very high priority for the Fed. We would need to a buy-in from Congress, from the administration, from broad elements of the public. And then he said, we would not proceed with this without support from Congress. And I think that that would ideally come in the form of authorizing a law, rather than us trying to interpret our law to enable it. So rather than debate over it and take a vote, they just want to pass a law. A digital dollar would be an entirely new currency that would at first go right alongside the dollar that we have right now. It will be used to pay for goods and services and would likely be managed by the Federal Reserve. They're still not sure if the Federal Reserve is going to do that. No physical banks will exist, meaning you won't have a debit card, you won't have a credit card, you won't have access to your own money. Your money will be given to you in whatever amount that is deemed that you're going to get. And when you spend that, you get no more. There's no way to get any more. You have no control over it. It would not be similar to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, because cryptocurrencies operate on a blockchain technology which is decentralized, meaning that once that coin goes out there as money, it's out there as money, and that's how it's used. There's nobody behind it changing how much you can use and how much, who's going to get what. Bitcoin doesn't operate like that, but our digital dollar is going to operate like that. It would be traceable and programmable. The Federal Reserve or some other designated entity would have the ability to create more digital dollars whenever it sees fit, which means, folks, that we're living off of credit. Nobody actually has any money. We're living off whatever credit the government allows us to use. And depending on how the legislation is written, setting up the currency, the dollars could be formulated to have various rules and restrictions built into their design. For example, a digital dollar could be crafted to restrict fossil fuel use, to give bonuses to people for spending at particular businesses, to enact de facto price controls by disallowing users from spending too much on particular products, or even to redistribute wealth. It's clear that the Biden administration and the Fed are working together to control the population. That's what you do when you control the money. You control the people because they have no money. They have to depend on you. And now you can see why the laws that the legislation that the president signed are so important, because they've got the money under their control, they've got the food, they've got the health care, they've got industry. Everything now is under the DOD. And if you don't live up to the lifestyle or make the commitments that you've been asked to make, then you have no money. And then how do you survive when you can't feed your children? And those are things that, I didn't know how deep it went until I started reading. I stayed up all night long reading, and I was up all night long last night praying. Because I said, Lord, I just need to know that I understood what I read. So I read it again. Because if you're going to share something, you need to make sure that what you're sharing is the truth. So I read it, and I prayed, and I asked the Holy Spirit. When I asked him to change the way I did things, this is not what I asked for, not what I thought he would do. But it's a wake-up call for me and for my family, and the way we are living our life, the way we see the last events that are happening around us. So you remember 2030, the Great Reset, where it was said you'll own nothing and you'll be happy about it? We are there. We are there. So this is number 3. Worldwide food crisis has been predicted, but we know we're already seeing the beginnings of it. Think about Joseph when he went to Egypt. Everything was plentiful. And then Pharaoh has a dream, and he has 2 dreams. And there's going to be 7 years of famine and 7 years of good. Now, do you think that food just disappeared after the 7th year? Even though Joseph was storing food, Little by little, that famine was creeping upon them during those 7 good years. It did not just happen overnight. So not only Joseph had time to prepare, but all God's children had time to prepare, because he says, I tell my secrets to my servants, the prophets. So there were others who had time to prepare. What are we doing? Because we are now living in that situation. Do we see it that way? On May 22, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a global food shortage in coming months. And they're not talking about years from now. You know, they're talking about this thing. They know it's coming, and they know it's coming soon. During the 2022 World Economic Forum, Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, told attendees that the anxiety about access to food at a reasonable price globally is hitting the roof. And I know that's true because I went to the grocery store for some minor things and ended up spending over $200 with 2 bags, and I was shocked by that because we don't do a lot of shopping. But prices of the things that I did get were a lot higher. President Biden in March of 2022 told reporters that food shortages are going to be real. And May 30th, 2022 Rutgers report showed the global food price index has risen 58.5% above the 2014 to 2016 averages as of April of this year. And the reasons they're giving for that are post-pandemic global demand, tightening food stocks, high energy prices, supply chain bottlenecks, export restrictions and taxes combined with Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, and extreme weather, historic drought over many parts of the world, including the Midwest, Brazil, Argentina, North Africa, the Middle East, and India. Meanwhile, China's agricultural lands are drowning. They've had the worst floods they've ever had in 60 years. So around the world, there's going to be food shortages, and you can see why. The conditions on the planet itself are not allowing people to grow food. So we've got a lot of work to do in our own little plot where we are the kings and queens if we are obedient. Sacrificing for the common good. America doing their duty by learning to do without. That was 1941. Does that not sound like Biden? On August 28, 1941, Roosevelt signed an Executive Order 8875 created the Office of Price Administration. Here we go, back with money. And its main responsibility was to place a ceiling on prices of most goods and to limit consumption by rationing. So history repeats itself. It has to, because nobody ever listens. Supplies such as gasoline, butter, sugar, canned milk were rationed because they needed to be diverted to the war effort. War also disrupted trade, limiting the availability of some goods. We're going through that right now. And we're not in physical war. We're in a spiritual warfare. Yes. Americans learned to do without. Sacrificing certain items during the war became the norm for most Americans. It was considered a common good for the war effort, and it affected every American household. And that's what they were talking about in Biden's order, that everybody, it's a group effort. We're all to work together in unity. It's for the good of all of us. Canning in wartime became a major focus of the U.S. government. Canning and victory gardens were presented in official propaganda as patriotic and unifying. Why do we need the government to do that for us? You know, to me, that was heartbreaking to me. Because when I first found out, I was praying for a presentation I was doing in Alabama, and the Lord led me to the original documents from the Ball brothers, from the Jar Company brothers. They set up community canning centers during the 1940s. And I read that, and I read that, and I read that, and I cried because those people were subject, they can only can when the government said they could can. The government didn't give them seeds, gave them ration cards for seeds. They had to trade the ration cards to get the seeds to plant the garden, and then listen to what happened after they planted it. In 1945, the USDA estimates that about 4 billion cans and jars of food were produced that year alone. In 1945, the USDA stated that 6,000 community canning centers were in operation throughout the United States, with instructional and educational oversight provided by the USDA via a home demonstrator from the Extension Office or a local qualified individual who supervised and instructed users in canning techniques. Now, how would you like to grow your garden and have to have the government come and oversee you putting your food away? And then, let's see what they do. Individuals brought their raw products to the center and paid. They paid a fee, a small fee, or donated a small quantity of their preserved foods in return for use of materials. But ration cards were serious. They barely got enough to feed their family for a couple of weeks. So the gardens really did augment those cards. But if you've got to then grow the food, take it to the government for them to oversee you canning, and then give some to them, and you barely got enough, where were God's people at that time? Because I don't believe that God didn't give a warning. I don't believe that. But from what I see in teaching, a lot of us are going to be in the same line that these people were. A lot of us. You don't know how many times I hear people say it's too much work. I'm not doing that. It's just, they have every excuse under the sun. But when I've had several people tell me, I'll just come to your house. No, you won't. And I'm here to tell you, I am not ashamed of you. If you've been sitting in these classes every year, buying up all this equipment and telling me it's in your garage, you won't be coming to my house to eat. Because, God says, don't throw your pearls to the swine. So, I mean, it's because to me, it's serious. We work very hard to do what we're doing, to have food on our table. And you sat in your chair for years, and then you're going to knock on my door and say, feed me. Oh, I'm so sorry, but I can't do that. It says here that with the rationing of vital metal goods for the war effort, pressure cookers and canners were not produced for much of World War II. So the government got you in the squeeze. You don't have any other way to put your food away. You've got to come to Uncle Sam. The centers offered women the opportunity to use this equipment if they did not have their own device or were unable to borrow from friends and family. So what I found out was that people who had canners were considered rich, and people would knock on their doors and ask to can with them. And they did that so much because people were more willing to share in the 40s than they are today. And they shared, but the gauges would go bad on their canners, and so they could not tell if they were processing safely. So these people, faithful ones, got together and petitioned the government, and Roosevelt rescinded the law in 1943, and the canners were then produced again so that they could have safe food. The other reason he rescinded the law was because he knew that food was going to the soldiers, and if they got botulism and died, he had no help. So the government always has their end of the bargain. But we're God's people. We should be learning, and I encourage all my classes, you're not sitting here to learn how to can food for your family. You're sitting here learning how to can food so you can teach somebody else how to do it. It's not a one-woman job to go out and do this. God told me to tell it, but he told you to tell it too. So you have to, we're responsible for one another. We can't just suck in and be leeches, take it all in and swell up and die. We can't do that. We have to be willing to share. And so what I'm giving you, share it with somebody. Look it up for yourself and read it. And once you've read it, share it. Because I really think that people think this whole thing is going to pass by. And I'm talking about our people. Because I talked to somebody the other day, and they were on their way to the movies. I said, to the where? You got time for that? Because I don't even have time to turn on the news. I don't know how you have time for that. Besides the fact that that's, they're all, the Bible said, he that liveth and loveth a lie, not going to be saved. You know, there's so many reasons to look at this and say, Lord, where am I in this picture? What am I doing, and what would you have me to do? So this is not a history lesson by far. Since America is once again gearing up for war, is it possible that food, essential goods, and canners will again be either rationed or not exist at all? And they're hard to find now because aluminum is through the roof if they can get it. I talked to the vendor, the manufacturer of the All-American canner, and they've cut off small vendors because they cannot supply them. They can barely supply the major chains that are demanding these things and can't get them. So how likely is it that we will be mandated to plant victory gardens? There's a program where the government gives you a greenhouse. And, they don't just give greenhouses. They'll do wells. They'll do fencing in of your cattle. They do a lot for farmland. So I was curious. I read the documents. And one of the documents states that you have a 3-year time period where they can come out and they can look over your property and the equipment that they supplied to you, and they can deem whether or not you're using it correctly, and if not, you owe them. But the other thing about that, it states that in the time of war, you're going to supply food to them. So if you've got one and you haven't read the complete document, you might want to do that. Because if your 3 years are not up when war finally breaks out, you are obligated to grow food for the government. The program is called EQUIP in Tennessee. How's it spelled? EQIP or EQUIP? Yeah. It's called EQUIP in Tennessee. Read the entire document. Because we had thought about doing the greenhouse. We have a small one. We wanted a bigger one. But when I finished reading it, I was like, I don't think we want to do that. Understanding the importance of the physical preparation. Physical preparation for the crisis requires an understanding of the last day events and truly believing that everything is not God's responsibility. We as individuals have a part. God has always given man a part in his salvation. So we have a part to play when it comes to making sure that we have the things necessary to feed ourselves and to maintain our health during the crisis. When it comes to food preservation, most people either don't have any prior information but have no bias against it, heard this before, never seen a demo, and do not have access to the equipment, have the equipment, have had hands-on training, are overwhelmed and afraid to begin. I hear a lot of people like that. Know this information and are already putting it into practice, or have previously watched demonstrations, have the equipment, just don't see a reason to do it, or feel like it's too much work and are not interested in starting. So evaluate yourself and find out where you are so that you know exactly where you need to be, and pray that the Lord will show you how to get there. Even if there's no shortage of food in your area, can you afford the current prices? Are you able to provide adequate food for your family every week and still meet your other financial obligations? Have you taken into consideration how much money could be saved by gardening and preserving your own food? Think about it this way. How much does a packet of seed cost? Average. $2, $3. And if you go to Dollar General, was it Dollar General? One of the dollar stores, they're Dollar Tree, they're 25 cents a pack. So take that pack and put 2 seeds in a hole, and you get 2 plants. But how much food do you get off the 2 plants? How much food did you get out of the whole package? Compare that to what you get in a grocery bag for $100, and you spent 25 cents. So the math doesn't add up for us, but yet and still Walmart is the #1 market in America because people flock there instead of making their home their grocery store. How many of you are already making your home your grocery store? Amen. Now look, this crowd is here for the right reason. Most of my classes, we have like 2 people raise their hands. It is a beautiful thing that you're doing because God will bless. So have you actually counted the cost if you never begin? Do you have the proper tools to get started? Are they in good working condition? Do you have extra parts in case of malfunction or breakage? And do you know where to get them? So how many of you have bought your extra parts for your canners already? You have extra gauges, you have extra handles, because all of this stuff is slowly disappearing. And I know I have burned handles on my canner before, so I have several sets to replace them with in the event that something happens. The gauge is the most important, though, because without that, you cannot tell if you're reaching that 240 degrees. So get an extra gauge if you don't have one. I'm hoping that by now you see that we are only moments away from the rug being pulled out from under each and every one of us. Our opportunity to live like kings and queens is going to pass us by. And if we don't realize that we must take a stand, and we must take a stand now. And so how do we do that? Let's begin with the 5 rights: the right attitude, the right information, the right equipment, the right technique, and the right storage container. So the right attitude, examine your motive for delay. And if you don't know how to preserve food, you will need training. So choose a presenter who you believe seeks the Holy Spirit's guidance for each and every presentation, who understands the spiritual as well as the physical importance of each presentation, gives easy to digest, accurate information, manifests enthusiasm for it because they live it, and is prepared to show that they are practicing what they preach. As a student, you need to prayerfully consider the relevance of the material that you will be studying. Keep an open and unbiased mind, because people will tell you all kinds of things that's not worth it. There's no nutrition in it. They will tell you a lot of things that are discouraging. So keep your mind unbiased. Be willing to listen and participate. Believe that the skills are urgently needed. Practice due diligence. Study your topic and practice the skills. And have an attitude of gratitude for God's warning and wisdom in providing the means and the time to prepare. For the right information, now this is, we all know, go back over the warnings that were given in the Bible days, the instructions, the examples for the tree of life, Noah, for Joseph, Elijah, the destruction of Jerusalem, feeding of the 5,000, and the 10 virgins, because the key with them is somebody was prepared and somebody wasn't. And the consequences are right there. So we need to go back over these and look at them from a different viewpoint and ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to us about how to prepare. Because in every one of those instances, God told them how to prepare. The spirit of prophecy, we get encouragement and guidance from them. This was so encouraging to me because I have complaints about food preservation sometimes and about my garden. So when I read some of the things that Sister White has been through, bear with me while I go through these, because maybe you see that some of these things have happened to you. She does talk about using glass instead of tin, and wherever fruit is grown in abundance, a liberal supply should be prepared by canning or by drying. But she says here, she purchased oranges and lemons by the bushel and pressed out the juice and canned it. I do that all the time, and people laugh. They think that is so funny. Why? Because we go down to the orchards in Florida. We purchase the produce. We make our own grapefruit juice, our orange juice, our lemon juice. We have it all winter long. But they're like, you can just go to Walmart and get that. No, I don't want it from Walmart. I want it from the tree. So if you have access to that, if you live in those areas, you can can those things and have it all year round. And I was encouraged when I saw that. She says, in 7 manuscript release, that Sister Nelson was a very faithful woman. She was canning and drying corn. And in that particular passage, she tells how much this lady canned. And considering that was the 1800s, that was a lot of work because they didn't have the conveniences that we do. But if you'll notice something about canning in Sister White's writings, they don't can any vegetables. So you know they were safe. They were careful. God showed them what to do. And they water bathed everything. They had no pressure canners. So in 12 manuscript releases, we are now in the midst of hot weather. Fruit is being canned vigorously. We have been at work canning for quite a while. So don't expect to do this and take a short period of time. It takes all day. We have a very thrifty orchard. They didn't have a lot, which bore a considerable number of beautiful peaches, which is the blessing of the Lord. In the Loma Linda papers, she writes, there's a large orchard set out to orange trees, grapefruits, plums, peaches, nectarines, lemons, and pears. In the cellar, I see a large quantity of jellies. I didn't know they made them, and I didn't know, there's so many things I hadn't really thought about. But it's encouraging to me to know that we're going back to the basics. God gave them the basics, and we're going back to that. And pretty soon we're going to go all the way back to Eden in our diet and in our dress and in everything else we do. We won't need to can anymore because it'll all be raw off the land. When we're in the caves, we need now to be searching for the wild edibles because when we're out there, that's all we're going to have. Shelf after shelf is laden with jars of rich fruit. The work of fruit canning is now going on, superintended by those who thoroughly understand the business. Now, these are superintendents of God's way. So we don't need the government to do it. Sister White didn't have the government come in and teach them how to can. They depended on God to educate them, and then they taught one another. Some of the fruit will be sent to the sanitariums. Look, we can do work with the sick, cook the food and take it to them when they're shut in and feed them. What a blessing. We had to buy peaches for canning. I'm going next week, Thursday, to pick up 100 cases of peaches because our group buys them every year, and that's how we can. So we're leaving here, actually, going to Michigan to pick cherries. We don't sit around waiting for stuff to come to us. And I'm encouraging you, go on upick.com, choose a state nearby you that has something that you don't have in your own state that you enjoy. Go there, pick it yourself, take it home, and preserve it. Because the bounty in your home grocery store should not be scarce. You shouldn't be eating the same things over and over again because you don't know where to get them. Start looking for where to get them. Plus, you need nutrition. Nutrition comes from different colors and different types of food. You need to search those foods out. When Walmart closes, you can't grow a pineapple at home. If you dried pineapple, if you freeze-dried pineapple, if you've got some in your jars, you've canned it, when it's gone for everybody else, it's not gone for you. So you want those kind of nutrition. You think about the bromelain in the pineapple and how it helps with inflammation. We want those things to augment what we have with our turmeric and other things. If you're not growing ginger and turmeric, and you can, if you're in zone 7 like ours, I'm growing ginger and turmeric. Didn't know I could do that, but tried it, and it works. Step out of the box. I'm encouraging you to step out of the box. Jones, we're in Tennessee. Yes. Yes, you can, and that's right, and moringa. Some of the fruit will be sent to the sanitarium. I said, we had to buy peaches. I helped pick some of them. So it wasn't beneath. I'm telling you, this was so sweet to me. I was so encouraged. So Carrie stands over the hot stove canning fruit. This is no easy employment, but get your children involved now. I didn't appreciate it as a child, but as an adult, I thank my mother and grandmother constantly because they helped me when I was young married not to be hungry, and now they've given me a ministry, and this is a gift. Being able to do this is a gift, and gifts don't always come easy, but they're still a blessing. They're still sweet. She says, this year we have had a few cherries of good quality, but not nearly as many as we had last year. We have had almost no apples or peaches on our trees. Now, this is my complaint. We've had these trees in the ground for over 8 years, and if they produce, a frost comes and kills everything. And I was so discouraged by that. But my daughter came to me one day and she said, Mom, if all of those trees produce, and that garden produces, and the green, the little pots that you got around here produce, what you going to do? Who's going to do all of that? I said, well, you know what, Lord, thank you. I can only handle this many things at a time. You'll know when I'm ready to take that fruit off the tree and put it in a jar. So praise the Lord. We have to learn to praise him anyhow. Soon after we came here, we set out some loganberry bushes, and we're so much pleased with their yield last year that we set out more plants. We had less rain than usual this spring, but the loganberry bushes are doing well. They stand the drought better than blackberries or strawberries. That's the other thing I got from this. I have been studying. There are seeds that are called long keepers, and I know most of you probably know that. But start looking for those, because when you plant those products, they are meant to stay in the root cellar for a longer period of time. So you can extend your season. You can, in the fall, the ground is done and you're starting to put things in your root cellar, you put those in, and then as you're planting for the new season, you're just running out of the lawn keepers. So make sure you have some of those in your arsenal when you get your seeds. So she says, from our place, we have had all the peas we could use in our family, and so we sold some. And there's another thing that we can do, because in our selling, we can be a witness. This is how we plant. This is how we grow. This is what I believe. Jesus is coming again soon. So she said, I wish you could be here with us to enjoy the products of our farm. Our new potatoes are excellent. We are using applesauce from our early apples. And then they extract honey. My husband can tell you about the honey. We have bees. I don't do bees. Fear, big time fear. I wear the suit. I go out and I help him when it's time to harvest and spin, but I'm not an everyday bee person. But they are the most fascinating little creatures, and they have a memory that will not wait. If you do them wrong one time, they're going to wait for you. Yes, they'll get you when you come back outside, and squirrels do that too. So, yeah, my husband got tired of the squirrels in our feeder, and he put a firecracker out there, and the squirrel jumped on the screen of the window and hissed. I said, when you come outside, he's going to be waiting for you. He had a mean look on his face. So she's talking about having early apples and making applesauce and extracting honey. And it's encouraging to know that we're following in the footsteps of the pioneers. So country living and gardening handbooks should be obtained and thoroughly studied. We must have a garden. We will need instructions on creating and maintaining healthy soil and cultivating successful plants. And how many of you have James White's book, Small Fruits, and have looked it over? It's very interesting. It concentrates a lot on berries, but that's what I'm into. I like planting the berries. And he gives a lot of good information on how to plant them, how to propagate them. Small fruits. And it's in the app. Sister White's app. The Ellen G. White app. It's under books, I think, but is it under Pioneer Writings? Yeah, but it's by James White. Pardon me? Yes, you can. You can dry vegetables as well as fruits. Do you have a dehydrator? At the end, I'll tell you how you can come to my house. USDA Guidelines to Home Canning. How many of you have that book? That book is nice because it gives the science behind what you're doing. And if you don't really understand why you do what you do, but you know you need to do it, read that book. Most of what I know came out of that book because it's the USDA Guidelines to Home Canning. That's it. You can get it on Amazon. Yeah, you can download it free. It's hundreds of pages to print. But you can still, yes. It is pickyourown.org, yes. Thank you for that. So in section 1 of this book, it gives you the scientific principles and the techniques you need to have. It tells you about it explains the equipment and how to use it and the jars and the lids. And it discusses the basics of canning and ingredients, how to put those together, and what you need to consider when you do it. And in section 2, it talks about specific foods, and it gives you recipes for those specific foods. The Ball Blue Book, everybody's heard of the Ball Blue Book. Did you guys know that it's actually backed by the USDA, and that you can contact any major university in the United States? They have a home food preservation department. They are the ones who do the testing for the Ball Blue Book and the USDA guidelines. And on their websites, they have recipes that have never been printed in the Ball Blue Book. So you will find other things there. And you can go on JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine.com. They do some testing, and you have to pay for the research. But I like going through the research because Ball tells you in their Blue Book that you cannot can with fresh lemon juice. But they don't tell you that they tested and it came out better than vinegar, because I have the test results and I got it from JAMA. So go out, do the research, do the hard research, and find out what you can and can't do. Because God, when it's pure and clean and natural, God has a way for you to use it. Yeah. You can, but if you want to use what you've jarred, like you go out and you squeeze your lemons and you want to can with that, you're able to do that. Yeah, the one thing about lemon juice is you do need to make sure that other things weren't added to it if you're going to buy it. But there's nothing wrong with buying it at all. But I'm just for those of like me who want to use what they've squeezed and put away, I was happy to find out that there are recipes out there and there's testing that proves that it's a good way to go. So you want to have the right equipment and recognize which pieces of equipment are essential and know where to get them. So this is where we're going to go here. If you're canning and you've not done it before and you just want to get what you need, you don't even have to buy a water bath canner. You can buy one pressure canner. Doesn't have to be an expensive one. As long as you don't lock the lid to it, it's now a water bath canner. So you can use the one pot to do both methods. So you will need a canner of some type, and then you'll need a toolkit. Other than that, you provide the rest. You provide the towels and the measuring devices and the food and your time and labor. But the necessities, other than for equipment, are just these two things. The toolkit, and you only need a basic toolkit. 3 or 4 pieces is enough. You can suffice with that. I was looking online, just one second, and they sell kits with 6, 7, 10, 12 pieces in them. But you don't need all those things, sponges and tongs, and half of them don't work anyway. So get the least expensive kit that will suffice and make that work for you. Besides the books, the pot, and the kit, you need some lids and jars. And it's that simple. You can start canning with just that. So if you're going to put away dry goods, you'll need a few more things than you do to get started with canning. We put up our dry goods in Mylar bags. They come in very small sizes to one that will fit in a 5-gallon bucket. So you can put the whole 25-pound bag in there and put it in one bucket and be done. There's disadvantages to doing that, but you can do it if that's, works is easier for you. You'll need some oxygen absorbers, and it takes a little bit more research to learn how to use the oxygen absorbers, but it's not hard. There's charts online that tells you what size absorber to put in what size bag. And depending on if it's a fine grain or a grain that has leaves a lot of air around it, like macaroni. So you will need a food saver if you're going to use oxygen absorbers, because these have to be resealed within 15 minutes or they will deplete themselves. So you will need a food saver or some kind of vacuum sealer to vacuum that back. I hear there's some kind of foot pump that you can use to do it with. Yeah, I haven't tried that yet, but you will need that. And then you will need a heat source. You can use a plain flat iron from the Goodwill. You can use an iron. Just make sure it's not the one you use for your clothes because they get kind of dirty. Or you can use an impulse sealer to seal the bags. But that's it. Other than that, everything else you would have at home. You'd have some paper to make a label with, a marker, and some tape. And a 5-gallon food grade 5-gallon bucket. And now everybody has them. Walmart has them. Tractor Supply has them. So they're very easy to be found. Do you have a question?
Okay, so my question was for the pressure canner, can you use it on a glass top stove?
That depends on the manufacturer of your stove. In your book, it should tell you, it'll give you a warning if you use it on glass top that the glass would break and then it would not be covered under the warranty anymore. We can't tell which stoves do and which stoves don't. You have to read the material for the stove, right? And if it's not in your book, you need to call the manufacturer and ask them. The one thing you can do on a glass top stove is water bath. But for the pressure canners, because of the level of heat, especially for the All-American, if you don't know that your stove was made for canning, don't put an All-American on your glass top stove. The weight and the way it distributes heat will cause the glass to crack. Right. Right. So most of you know the difference between these two canners, correct? You don't? Okay. Okay. We'll go over it real quick. This is the Presto Canner, and it's available. When it's available, you can even find it at Walmart and Amazon. It has a gauge, and this gauge tells you the pounds of pressure that the canner reaches once it's in operation. It comes with weights, and there is a wasp in there. That's a surprise. It comes with weights. You'll either get a 3-ring weight, and that's 5, 10, and 15 pounds. So it's actually this way, 5, 10, and 15 pounds. It'll either come like that, or it will come in one piece. If you get this one and you live in Tennessee, you're less than 1,000 feet above sea level, you can't use this one because this is set at 15 pounds. And in our area, you need to process your food at 10 pounds. You'll need to contact Presto and order this weight. And a lot of them come with this, but they don't tell you that you should read the chart in your book to find out if that's going to work for you. So check out if you order this canner, check out your weight and make sure you get the proper one for your altitude. And if you want to know about how to judge what weight is proper for your altitude, it's in the Ball Blue book. There's a chart there, and it'll say if you're at this altitude, you need this weight. So this is the the other thing about this one is it has a rubber gasket. The rubber gasket should be checked every time you use your canner to make sure there are no cracks. This one is cracked. And that it's in good condition, because this is what actually makes the seal and keeps the steam in and raises the temperature of the canner. So keep an extra gasket on hand, because it takes a while, but they do crack and need to be replaced. The other thing that it comes with standard is our racks. When you're canning, you must always have a rack on the bottom of the can to prevent thermal shock, where there's just too much heat and the jar cracks. So you need something on the bottom. If you buy a used one and it doesn't have a rack, you can either order it, or you can just use a plain kitchen towel. Put it in the bottom, line the bottom of your can with a towel, put the jars in first, and then pour the water. The jars will hold the towel down and keep it from floating up when you're adding the water. The All-American is the mother of canners. This is spun aluminum. This is cast aluminum. It's poured as one piece. There's no gasket to replace. The lid on the Presto sits on the canner and twists lock. The lid for the All-American has wing nuts that hold it down in place. So there's a difference in the closure. This is the more secure closure. This has a metal-to-metal seal that takes the place of the gasket. So once this metal is made to fit exactly the inside rim of the top of the canner so that the air does not escape. So you have to oil this periodically to keep it from sticking, because it'll lock itself in place if you don't do that. So the other thing about this canner is that it has a gauge, but the gauge tells you both the pounds of pressure and the temperature that you reach. Now, if you're canning, how many of you know with pressure canning, what's more important, the pounds of pressure or the temperature? Why? That's right. Botulism spores only die at 240 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. So if you don't know that, and you're canning with a canner with a gauge with just pounds of pressure, and you're at 9 pounds of pressure rather than 10, you are not reaching 240 degrees.
Do you know how much cost this?
Yes. Yeah. I have a chart I'll show you, but this one now, I have a chart showing you the history of 5 years of how they've changed in price. I'll show it to you. This one's now $175, the Presto, which was like $79. This one's now $449. Last year, it was $339. Yeah, it's going up really, really rapidly. But I have one of these that somebody gifted me, and it's over 40 years old and operational. So they will last you a lifetime. You can pass them down to your children. It's worth the money. I actually own 7. I sell them, but I own 7 because we train with them. Sometimes we have to use 6 or 7 at a time with the classes. But this one is a 25. The 25 is the standard. Someone back here there's several people back here that have questions.
He has the mic back here.
Okay.
Do you have any information on freeze drying?
I do. We do teach a freeze drying class. We do own a freeze dryer. It is the most expensive way to put away food. It is the least productive because you have to run that freeze dryer every day of the week to get the same quantity that you would get out of a dehydrator in a few days. So it is very expensive. People, they say it's not because they say the energy usage is low. I don't find that to be true. I don't use mine very often. I use it when I'm training. I take it with me on the road and show it to people who are interested. But for me, I think that my time is better spent drying. So I don't use it very often. The only thing I would use it for is stuff like avocados. Yes.
You mentioned the oxygen absorbers.
Yes.
That within 15 minutes they go bad, and that they have to be resealed. I'm putting mine in a mason jar after I open the bag. Will that still keep them?
They're only for that's a short-term method of storage. You're supposed to do that when you're in the process of putting your dry goods away, and you don't want to stop to seal them with a vacuum sealer. So you put them in a mason jar. You make sure the jar is small so there's not much oxygen left in there, and it will seal the jar. But after a while, you'll open that, and you'll find that they're getting hard. And if you find that, they have been depleted. Because when you get them, they're soft like sand, and you can hear them. But the longer they stay in that jar, the more firm they're becoming. And they're becoming firm because that's iron oxide. And the iron oxide is absorbing the oxygen out of the air and solidifying into a little iron material. So you want to not leave them in there more than an hour. Because if you do, they are going to be used up. Yes.
I have not tried it yet, but we sometimes get small batches coming out of the garden, and I think I need to do something with these. And I have an Instapot. Have you ever used that to just do small batches?
Yes, ma'am.
And
The only Instapot that's safe for canning is the Instapot Max. Is that what you have? The one that's programmable before canning. Yes, I think it's great. I use it when I have little pints of mixed vegetables or whatever that I want to just get out of the way because I don't have enough to do a quart. And since it does 4 at a time, it's a great way to do it. But don't do it in any Instapot. Get the Instapot Max if you're interested in doing that. The other thing I got was the ball water bath canner, the electric one. That's great. You throw everything in there, you program it, you walk away. You come back when the buzzer beeps. When you have small batches, because it only holds 5 quarts, but if you've got small batches and you're running your stove with all this other stuff, you can plug that in and let it go and concentrate on the bigger jobs. So it's the electric water bath canner. So it's digital. That's right. It's called digital. There's 2. There's one for water bath and there's one for pressure. The pressure is the digital. Ball has a pressure digital canner as well. Now, the disadvantage to those electric pressure canners are timing. It takes a lot. They're well insulated, and it takes a lot longer for them to cool down. So you're going to spend a lot of time waiting for that food to come out of the canner. But other than that, the convenience of being able to do a small batch while you're working on larger batches, sometimes it's worth it. Or if you're a small family, it's well worth it then because you're not going to do a lot anyway. You have a question?
I think I have. Okay. I have a microphone. Will you provide us information regarding your trainings?
The trainings that I have are these 2 books, Prayer and Research. I'm constantly, the things that I was telling you, I look up on JAMA, Journal of American Medicine. I'm a nurse, so scientific journals are my thing. And I find a lot of proof for what I'm doing, reasons for why I shouldn't do certain things when I read the science behind it.
So what about us wanting to learn from you, coming to where?
Well, we'll get to that at the very end, and I'll
Beautiful.
explain.
Okay, thank you so much.
We have another question? This gentleman here? Yes, right here.
Thank you. We've canned for many years. We're from Michigan. But lately, when we buy boxes of Kerr or Ball lids, they say that they're only good for 18 months.
That's right.
What do you think of that?
They've been the sealant has been reformulated. So I have a bunch of the old ones that I'm just reusing, honestly. And it's true, they do open up. Because I've got several things in my root cellar right now that I'm real upset that I got to get rid of because they will open.
So those bad lids are kind of nationwide?
They're everywhere. Since COVID, nobody has quality control anymore. So I brought a jar to show you. This is a ball jar. I took it out of the box, and there's a huge defect all along the side of the jar. And so the lid was defective as well. And I've seen that more now than I've ever seen it in the 20-some years I've been canning. Yeah. Yeah, there's no quality control. Yes.
There's lots of questions.
Yes.
Really quickly, I heard you mention something about not canning vegetables.
No, Ellen White. I was talking about Ellen White. They didn't can vegetables because they didn't have a pressure canner. When you read in the Spirit of Prophecy, she's always talking about fruit that they canned. Right.
But it was because they didn't have the ability to
That's
do the vegetables.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
they put their vegetables in root cellars. You will hear her talking about that and about drying.
Right. Super. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you possibly dehydrate in the oven and it works?
You can. The disadvantage to it is that most ovens don't go below 160 degrees. And to properly dry and maintain the nutrition, you need to be like at 115. So you're better off using either air drying or sun drying, solar drying, and they're not the same thing, or a dehydrator.
Okay, so I'm hearing dehydrating is really good.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have done is to cook the meal and then put it in a dehydrator in the Excalibur and then do what's called a brake bleeder. Does that sound familiar?
No.
And then seal it that way.
I have to talk to you afterwards. I have not heard that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, botulism.
Yeah.
So if you've canned something and it appears fine, is there a way to determine if it's not fine?
What the Ball Blue Book says is that once it's been through the process of 240 degrees and you open it and you're kind of suspicious, now you open it and it's sealed. Not if it's not sealed, but if it's sealed, boil it for 20 minutes and then use it. Now that's from the Ball Blue Book. So I practiced that, and we're still amongst the living. But I pray over everything I eat anyway. So, but there's the science behind it says that the spores have been destroyed, and if there is anything there, it's bacteria. And when you boil it, the bacteria goes up to the water goes up to 212 degrees, and that's enough to kill bacteria. Oh, she's back here.
Since the lids are not dependable on your jars anymore, can't you put wax in them to seal them and then put the lids on top? So if your lids fail, you still have the wax there. And also, do you have any information or a book on dehydrating?
I didn't bring my dehydrating book, but if you give me your email, I can give you the title of the one I'm using. And as far as the wax is concerned, because of, especially with things that are high in sugar like jellies and jams, wax tends to promote mold growth. So that was why it was discontinued in the first place. I remember as a kid, my mom used to put wax on our jellies because we didn't have the ball lids and rings. And she would scrape off the mold and put the jelly on the toast. But that was the reason that was stopped. And I was glad that was over.
The method that you stated is another alternative to use besides canning, since the canning jars are not as reliable? Okay. And also, besides that alternative, are there other alternatives?
Well, it's not that the jars, all of the lids won't pop at the same time or anything like that. You will get some that do that. I haven't had a whole batch of lids go bad on me. But where I used to not have any go bad, now there'll be 2 or 3 in a batch that will do that.
And when you say go bad, do they go
That
bad
means-
during the process, or once they're sitting in?
Once they're sitting on your shelf.
Okay.
And, you know, one good way of making sure you know what's happening with your food is use the rotation method. Every time you can, you should be taking the oldest from the back and bringing it to the front and using it as soon as you can, and then put your newer things to the back. And then they don't have time for the lids to break. Everything is labeled and dated, yes.
You may have answered the question with the wax. I was going to ask if getting the Amish can cover or tops work well, because I see in their stores they have cans that are single. It's not like the ball, it's one, but I do know that there's a ring of wax there.
Yeah.
So
I've never tried them. I've tried the Tadler lids, and they were just too much work for me. And plus, once I did it and I lost a whole batch of jelly, I wasn't willing to risk any more food on those. So if they work like that, where there's just that single piece and you have to, there's a whole step process you have to do to use it. Yeah, oh, it's one screw-on lid. I have a friend that has used those for her grape juice when we go up to Michigan, and she loved them. I didn't try them, so I couldn't really speak on it. Oh.
2 quick questions. What are the 2 books that you recommend?
This one is the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning.
Thank you.
And this is the 2022 reprinting. So they haven't reprinted it since 2020. I'm sorry, it's the 2020 reprinting. They haven't printed it since then. And this, I think, is the 38th or 39th edition of the Ball Blue Book. It is. And you want to get the most current one because they correct their mistakes in the new ones.
Okay. And the second question is the JAMM, J-A-M-M?
1 M.
Oh, JAM.
JAMA. It's J-A-M-A.
Okay. And that stands for the Journal of American Medical Association. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, 2 questions. How long is the Mylar bags good for once you seal them with the oxygen absorber?
Average 20 to 25 years.
Okay.
With proper sealing. That's my number one go-to. That's my number one. And the class, we're teaching, we didn't used to teach this. We used to just teach how to do grains. We're teaching grains, period. Now we're teaching grain nutrition, how to select them, you know, how to store them. And you need to know because grains are nutrient-packed, and especially the ones that they use in other countries that we've never heard of. So we've been trying grains from around the world. They're delicious. Their texture, some of them is a little bit different than ours, a little more al dente. But you're talking about the best grain bowls. You guys got to try it.
So that was my next question, because I know you were talking about the canning and the food and everything. But would you recommend us getting the grains and stirring them in the Mylar bags and use them when we actually need to, when we have to cook them? Can you store them dry?
Yes, you store them dry. I would recommend everybody start with grains now, and the main reason is because with the war in Ukraine and a lot of wheat used to come from Russia, a lot of grains are more difficult to get right now.
I just learned that they said that worldwide we only have 10 weeks of grain storage.
So, yeah. But if you can get it, because Wildwood yesterday and today is having a 30% sale off their grains. Call them, order it, and then go pick it up when you can, because that's a good deal. Right now, who's having a sale on anything? And they're offering it on their grains and their beans and nuts. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that if we store in those buckets and Mylar bags, is it absolutely necessary to seal them with heat? Because I've stored some on the 5 gallons with the Mylar and I put the oxygen absorber, but I did not seal them. I just, it has that Ziploc kind of thing. I just did that, squeezed the air out and then zipped it with that. Do I have to go back in there and actually seal them with heat?
You should check them, since you can unzip it, to see if the oxygen absorber is patent or not. If it's hard, it means that it's depleted and you will need to seal them with heat. You'll need to put in a new oxygen absorber and you'll need to seal them with heat.
Seal them.
So I would open at least one and
Okay.
see how the oxygen is doing in there. Yes, it does. If there's eggs in there, it doesn't allow them to hatch, and if they're live in there, they're going to die. They need oxygen to
My
survive.
question might be dumb, but my teacher said there's no such thing as dumb questions, so I'm going to ask it. The difference between oxygen, is there a difference between an oxygen saver and a food saver that you put in with the machine and it sucks it dry? Are those the same thing, or is it different? I've never heard of the oxygen saver.
The oxygen absorbers that you're going to put in your bags for Mylar bags, can you pass this down to her, is a little packet. You'll find it in your purses, in your shoes. It's made of a different material.
Okay.
It's not iron oxide. It's a different material according to what it's packed in. But it's there to keep the thing from drying out, like leather, to keep it from drying out. So those, you're talking about in the food saver? That's made, because it's a plastic product, it'll break down over time. So you don't want to really put that on your shelf. But it's very, very good if you're going to freeze your fruits and vegetables. You can do that with it. And it'll last a long time. All right. Do we have more questions? Because I'm going to move on. Okay. With the food saver?
I run into problems with the liquid, like if I'm doing berries, and I send it through the save a seal or whatever it is, a seal mill, and then it gets
starts to leak.
Yes.
Because you have to buy one that's made for both liquid and dry.
Oh, there are different
They
kinds.
are different. If you get one that's made for dry only, it will suck the liquids out with the air. But if you get one that's made for liquid, it works in a different manner, and it won't do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so just for clarification, for the grain, if I have a food saver and I was thinking to take some knowledge here, and I ordered some grain, like you said, from Wildwood, is it a matter of me getting an oxygen absorber, putting in my food saver bags, or you're saying get a Mylar bag?
You need Mylar bags to do it.
And that has to be that size, or do they have different sizes?
No, you can choose your size.
Okay, and then after that, put it in the bucket?
Yes.
Okay.
Seal it and put it in the bucket.
Seal it, put it in the bucket. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Try not to let the mic point towards her. Yeah, make it point towards you.
Okay, thank you for waiting. All right.
Yes, it seems as though this is a female thing because I haven't heard one man ask any question.
Yes.
So on behalf of the men, I will ask a simple question. Now, when you're saving grains, is it safe to use diatomaceous earth if you don't have all the other sophisticated things? Just plain diatomaceous earth in the 5-gallon buckets with the grains.
It's safe to use it, but I'll tell you why I don't. Diatomaceous earth, when it comes in contact with tissues, cuts the tissue. So that's human tissue, that's animal tissue, that's anybody's tissue. So all of those little micro cuts that you're getting as you eat that diatomaceous earth, they will heal quickly over time. But if you're consuming large amounts of that, you could end up with an intestinal bleed, a gastric bleed, an esophagus bleed from the little micro cuts from the diatomaceous earth. So I don't use it for that reason. So this is food. All diatomaceous earth is meant, it's little diatoms that actually, when they come in contact with insects, that's how they kill them. They cut them up. So all diatomaceous earth, that's what it is. That's what it does. So it hasn't been a concern. Most people don't have that happen. But if you're a person who's on blood thinners, or if you're a diabetic who bleeds and doesn't want to stop bleeding, then my son is diabetic. So I don't use things like that for that reason. But, it's rare that it happens. But anything to me that could bring some type of harm are things, those are my last choice, my last resort. I try to find something that I can use that would be a little safer.
What about preserving your food in mason jar with the oxygen absorber?
You can do that, and you don't have to do the oxygen absorber. You can use the mason jar. So you're ahead of the game. You can use the mason jar with the vacuum sealer and avoid. How do you do that? The vacuum sealers come with a tube. Have you ever noticed that in your package you got a tube and you wonder what that little tube was for? It's because you can buy the Food Saver jar sealer separate from the vacuum sealer, and this jar sealer attaches with the tubing to the vacuum sealer. Then you take the jar, and it comes in either wide mouth or regular mouth. So then you take the jar. Wide mouth. You take off the ring. So you've put your food in. Don't need an oxygen absorber. You're going to fill it to 1-inch headspace because you want space for it to vacuum. You're going to put the flat part of the lid on only. You're going to snap this down over the lid. You're going to put this in your vacuum sealer, lock it, make sure this is all the way down. Turn on the vacuum sealer. Oh, it's not plugged up. So that would help if I had power. But you turn on the vacuum sealer and set it to vacuum, and it takes all the air out and seals it just as if it was in a pressure canner. You can lift it by the lid, and it's completely sealed. So that saves your oxygen absorbers. If you're going to do this method, buy the lid sealer and don't spend all that money on the oxygen absorbers. These are good in the pantry in a clear jar like that for 6 months to a year. That's what my kitchen pantry, my kitchen grocery store has these in it. And that's what I use. And then my Mylar storage, when I'm run out of this, I go to my Mylar, I get a bag, and I store mine in the bag according to my jar size so that I can just open it once, pour it into the jar, no more oxygen absorbers in that bag because I'm done with it. And then I take my bags, I wash them out, I hang them open to dry because they're reusable.
Okay.
They're reusable down to 2 inches. So you can just use them.
Another question, for people who have the freeze dry, they also have that you can process your mason jar absorbing the air for 4 minutes. When you take the tray out, have you used that?
No, I don't do it. As I said, freeze drying is time consuming. That freeze dryer's first cycle has to go down to a negative 40 degrees. And then you know how long it takes to come back up, and it's an evaporative process.
Take 24 to 32 hours.
That's
to do
right.
it.
That's why I don't do that.
But if you already have one, to use it to preserve the food, absorbing the air, doing the same method with the freeze dry when you take all the trays out. Have you done that?
No, because you can only get a few jars in there, and I can vacuum seal a whole case of jars before I even turn that thing on. And there's only 4 or 5 jars in there. I'm a big one for saving time and getting the job done. I don't want to be in the kitchen forever.
You only take 4 to 7 minutes for absorbing the air. You don't have to do it to run the whole cycle to do the freeze dry. It's just for
to take the air out.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, by the time you've done 4 jars in there, I've vacuum sealed 20, because this only takes a few seconds to do.
But if you already have it.
If you have it, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying that for time, I would see that there were other ways you can do it and save the time. Yeah. Yes, my daughter was telling me that. You've used, yes. I'm going to get one because I haven't tried it yet. Brake bleeder. A brake bleeder, which you bleed your brake lines with. Yes. It's the thing you bleed your brake lines with. All right, we're going to move on to the grain mill itself.
Hello.
Oh, you have a question? I'm sorry.
Hi, I have a 2-part question regarding beans. What is the safest way to dry can your beans? And also, once you cook your beans, how many pounds of pressure would you cook them under when you have them in the canner?
If you're in Tennessee, below 1,000 feet sea level, it's 10 pounds of pressure. And dry canning means different things. So which method are you talking about?
Well, I've seen the method where you put the beans in a ball jar in the oven. You heat the ball jar up in the oven, and then you put the beans in and put the cap on, and then once you take it out, the hot ball jar out, you put the dry beans in there, and you put the top on it, and then as it cools, it seals and sucks down and seals it.
The oven canning is not recommended.
Really?
No. The reason why is there's not an oven made that holds a consistent temperature. Ovens fluctuate. They actually come on and they go off, and the temperature rises and drops. In order to kill botulism, the temperature has to steadily stay at 240 degrees Fahrenheit. And the steam in the canner is what creates that environment. You don't know what temperature the oven is at. You can't prove that you were at that 240 degrees consistently during that entire timed cycle. Because I could show you charts that show you when you come up to the 240 and then you get to the set point, which is where you're going to stay for the 90 minutes.
Right.
And then at the 90 minutes where the drop off is and the temperature begins to drop. But you can't prove that in an oven.
So the safest place, or what is the safest method to put up your beans dry, preserve them dry?
In a canner.
You do them in a canner?
I do them in a canner.
So you put the dry beans in the jar, and then you put them in the canner with the water?
I put the dry beans in the jar with the water and put the jar in the canner, and that's the way I can them. But I soak my beans prior.
Oh, you soak them prior?
Yes, I soak them prior. Because, and then they're completely cooked. You can open them, eat them right out of the jar. So I don't oven can at all. I know people do it.
Yes.
But because we hear our oven cycling.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, and I know it takes a consistent temperature across the board to kill botulism, I don't take that risk. So, it's up to each individual. Like I said, everybody's got their way, but you need to pray about your methods. Because if science has proven that the ovens don't consistently keep a temperature for the right amount of time, then I kind of lean in that direction. And plus, a canner is easy to do. Just put the jars in there and turn the flame on and watch for the temperature to come up. So, anybody else has questions? Okay. In the vacuum sealer?
Yes.
No.
Thank you.
No.
That would not take care of the botulism.
No.
Thank you.
No.
That's how important green beans are, because they will make you really sick.
Yes. Yes.
I've known people.
All right, so we're going to move on. We talked about having the right. Oh no, we're going to finish with the grain mill, and then we'll move on. I keep losing this thing. So this is just one grain mill. When we do our demonstration, we do several. But what I like about this one is it's a hand crank mill. It has a motor option to it, and that's the motor that goes to it. It's really simple to use. You pull out the hand crank, you stick it, and it goes in a certain way. You put in the motor, you turn it, and that's it. It holds 4 cups of grain. It mills 4 cups in about 3 minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes. It's really quick to mill. It's very, very fine. You can adjust for the grind on your grains. It will grind other things. It says on the side of the box what other things it will grind. But if you want to do beans and corn, there is a separate auger for that. This is the best inexpensive mill that I have ever tried. I have the Country Living mill. This grinds like the Country Living mill, and it doesn't take as long as my Country Living mill does. This is Kitchen Crop. It used to be Victorial. They just changed. They just rebranded their stuff, so it's now called Kitchen Crop. But right now, you can get this mill. It's all over the place on Amazon. But right now, it's close to, with the motors, right at $175. If you had gotten it 2 months ago, you would have gotten it for $125 with the motor. But they discontinued the old motor and made a new one that will fit not only on the grain mill, but it also fits on their food mill. So you can run 2 pieces of equipment with the one motor. So they raised the price of the motor. But it's the best. It has a 5-year warranty. I can't remember where this one is made. It's not made in the United States. But it's a very good mill, and they stand behind it. I've never had a problem. My daughter is the only mill she uses, but I use several. And this, though, is my favorite because when I'm teaching, this is how heavy it is. I just pick it up and take it to class. I've taken it with me on trips. I want to make bread. I take it with me. You can put it in a suitcase. So it works, and it works. It works very hard. It works very well. So it will do cake flour to I make cream of wheat with it. So how many of you know that cream of wheat is actually red winter wheat berries ground coarse? I was so disappointed to find out. It's semi-coarse. It's not totally coarse. That's all. It's that and salt and a decaking agent. So I make my own. You can just grind the wheat up and make your own cream of wheat. Yeah. So there's a lot that you can do on your own. Just like I said, do research. Start studying. Whatever you eat, start looking at what's in that. How is that prepared? And then start doing it yourself. We made fruit cocktail just to see if we could do it. It was great. It was a lot of work. It took 2 days. It was a lot of work, but it was really great. And so my friend and I have a motto: if it's on the grocery store shelf, you can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
Can do it too.
Question.
Yeah. Oh. Yes.
Had a question, and I just need your advice. I know that there's this electronic equipment we can use. Do you suggest we go ahead and get something like this or invest in a hand-cranked mill?
This is a hand-cranked mill.
Oh, it is?
Yes, you take the handle off and add the motor if you want. But it is a hand-crank.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. And a hand-cranked blender, too, because...
Yeah, I haven't purchased a blender, hand crank blender yet. I'm really hoping not to have to work that hard. I'm looking forward to the day that we go back to eating right out of the field and not having to cook. But there are a lot of convenient products out there now, but you do need to make sure that we're getting things we can use over the long term that, like you said, don't have to have electricity. So we're going to, go ahead.
Where do you suggest that we get recipes for canning fruit with low sugar or no sugar?
Oh, PomonaPectin.com. And they have POMONAPECTIN.com. Great low sugar recipes. You can use low sugar, no sugar, fruit juice, what do you call it? Stevia. They have recipes on their little card in the box for just about any sweetener that you would want to use to make jellies and jams. And they go, I think it starts at like I can't remember. It's a low amount, and then it goes up to 2 cups. 2 cups is the max for every 4-cup batch. So, but it starts way lower than that. So I usually, if I'm going to do a 4-cup batch, I usually use no more than 3/4 cup or to 1 cup of sugar. Or if I'm going to use honey, I use less than that. So. Oh, the recipe I use for that is for every 4 cups of water, I use 1 cup of sweetener. And that's what it does is it works by osmosis. It goes into the cell of the fruit. It pulls the juice out. And the water tastes like the fruit juice, so the fruit tastes like fruit instead of sugar. So that's what you want to do. When you put a higher concentration of sugar in the water, all of that can't go into the cell wall, so it remains in the liquid, and the fruit is really sweet. You want only enough to enter the cell walls and pull out those liquids and enjoy it as fruit, the taste of fruit. The max that you should use is 1 1/4. If you got fruit that's not really ripe, then you can bump it up to 1 1/4. Okay, we're going to move on to the last part of this because I know we're running out of time. I had a clicker somewhere. Since I don't know where that is. Let's see. So we were talking about equipment should be purchased as soon as you can. So whenever you're able, try and get the things that you know that you're going to need to do the type of preserving that you want to do. But don't do just one type of preserving, because say you did everything in glass and a tornado came through your area and all your glass fell off the shelf and broke, you're starting all over. So you do want some dried things and some frozen things and some dehydrated things, so that and because each of those is going to have a different level of nutrition in them as well. And the whole goal is to be nourished as well as to enjoy your food. So you also want to make sure that you're sprouting and that you're juicing your fresh vegetables as soon as they come out of the garden, because you want that kind of nutrition as well. Because we don't want to just eat. We want to be healthy, because we're going to need a clear mind in order to finish this work. So just add some other things to it to make sure your diet is well balanced. So here's the list. The All-American Canner in 2017 was $259.99. The Presto was $69.99. The quart canning jars for a case was $8.75. The canning toolkit, $7.75. And the grain mill was $89. And you can see from the list every year, and you can see the jump when COVID happened. So the All-American 941 that holds 18 quarts, when I bought it, was $299. That canner today is $647. Yeah. Last year I sold it for $4.99 because I was able to get a really good deal for them. But this year I haven't even tried to purchase them because they're out of the budget. They're really expensive. So if you can start looking for yard sales, because people are still finding them at yard sales, at the Goodwill. I went to a store that gets returns from like Lowe's and Home Depot, and they had one there. So keep your eyes open, or if you've got a friend who has 2 or 3 and wants to get rid of one, buy it from them because it's worth it. If the gauge is broken, you can always replace the gauge. So you want the right technique. So if you're pressure canning, you want a pressure canner. If you're water bathing, you can use any large stock pot. You don't even have to have a rack. You can put a towel in the bottom of that pot and still process your food. So the right storage conditions. We do a whole class on how to store your food, root cellars and all of that, but you don't have to have a root cellar. You can dig a hole in the ground, line it with rocks, Put a trash can in there, put sand around that, and then put your vegetables in there. You want to line them with either straw or sawdust. As you put them in layers in the can, put a lid on it, put a board over that, put a brick on top of that, and you got a root cellar. So that I have a lady who sent me a picture. She did hers in a school bus. They buried the school bus, and they put shelves in there, and I mean, it has doors and everything. You don't have to do anything. You just open the door, go in there, and her root is dark. They painted the windows black. So, I mean, be inventive. There's so many things you can do. My neighbor, her root cellar's under her beds. All of her beds have the storage box with wheels on them, and she puts her jars in there and rolls them under the bed. It's cool, it's dark, it's the perfect environment. So there's many things that you can do to store your food if you don't have a lot of pantry space. So resources, please take a picture of this. This is where you can buy bulk dry goods. You always need to have a list of resources to share so that if you don't have time to go and you've got a friend who can go for you, hey, this is where you can pick my stuff up at. Next time I'll pick up yours. So you want to make sure you have a list like that you can refer to when one of your vendors doesn't have what you're looking for. You can try a different one. I have one more list for you after this one. So stay, if you're taking pictures, if you came up to the front, stay for one more slide. Sure. Yeah, beans we do a lot, but grains we've grown buckwheat, we've grown sorghum. I can't remember all of them because my husband plants them, and I'm just amazed at what they do. We had one fail this past spring. I can't remember what it was, but we did it as a ground cover, and then we thought we would harvest it, but it actually frosted early and killed it. Grains are not hard to grow. They require space. Some of them require a lot of water. So you have to just know that you're able to provide for their needs. But it's been worth it. When we did the sorghum, that's really neat because you get the grain and the syrup. Yeah. Yes, cranberry beans, lima beans, black-eyed peas. Yeah. Because the wonderful thing about doing beans is they dry on the vine. So you don't take them off the vine until they're all crispy and dried up, and then you just shell them and put them away. So they take the work out of shelling peas. That's a lot of work. But drying them, they kind of fall out of the shell when they're ready. Yes.
And some of them contain soybeans, and I opened some to make some milk the other day, and it was airtight. Somehow they sealed them. They were 20 years old, so I don't know. But I pulled the little Band-Aid off, and I could hear the air go shh, but they were no good.
No, because they're in glass, and light is the enemy as well as the oxygen and heat. So if they were stored in a warm place and they had a lot of light, even though they're sealed, they're going to go bad. All right, we're going to finish up with the next slide. Wait a minute. That's I had another one here. Hold on. Yeah, that's my information. That's not the one. I have a card. I have a card I'll give you. You don't have to take a picture of that. I have another list here somewhere. It might be on a different slide. But, yeah, it's probably on a different, I didn't put it in this PowerPoint, but I'll get it for you. It's a list of places where you can get the equipment. So I'll have to get that for you before I leave. But if you want a card or a brochure, I have those here. I'll just is there anyone who would pass them around for me? If you didn't get a pen or a knife and you'd like one, we can pass those back around. There's some brochures. And here's the cards. And then if you want to take the pens, I don't know if there's somebody who wants the pen. Okay. So the last thing is we have started. I was really impressed with the community canning centers and what all could be done there. So 2 years ago, we started building a barn dominium. And it's a slow process because it's a cash building. So we are now 65% finished. The drywallers are there as we speak. So we're getting ready to put in the floors. The purposes for this building is purely ministry. We want families to come out, especially families with small children, to learn what it's like to live off the land. We want to go through the canning, the dehydrating, the grains, the works. While they're there, they'll come, they'll stay a weekend or during the week, whatever their schedule allows, and we will go through these things with you from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy so that you're comfortable doing these techniques when you go back home. So we're not open yet, but keep the card. If you're interested in coming, it's a donation-based ministry, and so we're not turning anybody away because we believe that everybody needs to know. So pray for us that the Lord will send faithful workers to help us to finish this building, because we wanted it finished last year, and God did not allow that, but he has a plan, and we're working from that plan. So God bless you. Let's have prayer. We're going to close with prayer, and then we're going to move. Yes. Okay. Yes. That's all I have left. Okay, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, I want to thank you and praise you, Lord, for giving me the courage to stand up and teach things that I've never experienced, Lord. And I want to thank you for this group of people, Lord, who have already begun to do the work that you have called us to do, because we have to go out, Lord. We have to be the example to those who don't know. So help us, Lord. Make us strong. Make us brave. Give us wisdom and knowledge and understanding. Lead us, dear Father, to the material that we need so that we understand what we're doing. And then, Lord, help us to take the charge and go forward. Forgive us, Lord, for being negligent and for not going out sooner. And help us, dear Father, to redeem the time, I ask. In the precious name of Jesus. Amen. All right. So God bless you. Yes. That's up to the Lord. We're waiting. Well, we need somebody to come right now and do, we have the, what do you call that stuff? Tongue and groove in the ceiling. We need somebody to do that. So as soon as, yes. She has them? Oh, okay. He has the bag. As soon as that happens, we will open it. But just keep in contact with me, and I'll let you know when it's ready. Yes.